and the topic of today is wetlands.
What's a wetland?
A wetland is an area of land where the soil is covered by water all year or during different parts of the year. These areas of land are saturated with water, and the water saturation usually determines what kinds of organisms can grow there.
Well, where are they located and what kind of organisms grow there?
They are found on almost every continent. Hydrophytes grow there, and so do ducks. Marshes, bogs, fens, and swamps are types of wetlands. So all the organisms that you can find there are found on wetlands. Now, we'll turn to the experts since we have so many questions. Please welcome expert 1 and expert 2.
Expert 1 and Expert 2 are at Dyke Marsh. The Dyke Marsh wetland is a 480-acre wetland ecosystem on the shoreline of the Potomac River. It is a tidal marsh, which means that it is on a tidal river.
Wetlands are disappearing all around the world. Global warming, deforestation, sand and gravel mining, and hydrological alterations such as canals, dams, and roads all contribute to the reduction of the wetlands. We spoke to a member of Friends of Dyke Marsh, Glenda Booth. Friends of Dyke Marsh is, according to their website, a volunteer group dedicated to preserving, restoring, and enhancing Dyke Marsh. Glenda explained the causes of the depletion of the Dyke Marsh wetland in her interview. The marsh extended out into the Potomac River. Then they started dredging it and hauling it away, and the first thing they took away was this promontory. Now it's gone. What this USGS study says is that this promontory protected the marsh from storms that came up the river. So now that it's gone, these storms are causing severe erosion, Glenda explained. Dredging of sand and gravel hauled away part of Dyke Marsh from 1940 to 1972, and it removed about 54% of the wetland. In her interview, Glenda said marshes in general are threatened by invasive plants and climate change. This has its own unique cause. According to a USGS study, with all this erosion, Dyke Marsh might have completely disappeared in 30 to 40 years.
How does damage to wetlands affect the wildlife and nature?
There is less species diversity and richness due to habitat loss. Here's an example. In 1950, there were 87 male marsh wrens in Dyke Marsh. However, in 2013, there were only 7 left. This just shows how damaging wetland destruction is to the local wildlife. Wetlands are essential to wildlife because they are transitional zones, or in other words, where the water meets the land. Therefore, there are many species that can live only on wetlands. Some species that are threatened in Dyke Marsh are the least bittern, American bittern, and the swamp sparrow. These last two were deemed extremely rare and critically impaired by the Virginia government. Some of the plants that have been labeled critically imperiled are the David sedge, river bulrush, and the rough avens. Today, Dyke Marsh is home to 300 plant species, 6,000 arthropods, 38 fish, 16 reptiles, 14 amphibians, 270 birds, and more than 20,000 insect species. As you can see, it is important to protect the homes of these animals. How would you feel if someone destroyed your home?
It's so terrible that so many organisms are affected by the destruction of the wetlands. Is anything being done about this big problem?
Wetland restoration is working to prevent this wetland loss. Wetland restoration is important for the environment in many ways. Wetlands are natural filters, prevent downstream flooding, prevent depletion of groundwater, protect shores from damage from storms, and are more productive than other types of ecosystems. They are also high in species diversity. In the U.S., 63% of endangered reptiles, 68% of endangered birds, and 75% of endangered amphibians survive on wetlands.
So is Dyke Marsh going to be restored?
Yes, plans have been made to restore the wetland and have been approved. Glenda explained in her interview that the first thing they would do is build this breakwater to replace this promontory that was removed. Then they would build a series of cells and then bring in fill and fill up these cells, and then plant wetland vegetation, and they hope that some wetland vegetation would naturally come back. Also, the National Park Service stated last year that 180 acres of wetland habitats will be restored. Glenda said in her interview, first they have to hire these engineers to do the design work for this. That's what they're working on now.
What can we do to help other wetlands?
The EPA has established a number of programs for wetland conservation and monitoring. The EPA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have established certain standards for reviewing permits for materials discharged that affect wetlands, such as roads and levees. The EPA has also worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the National Marine Fisheries Service to increase wetland area. These are huge agencies that have been successful at helping restore wetlands, but there are things that everyone can do to preserve the wetlands. People can participate in a volunteer wetland monitoring program, support a local watershed association, build a wetland, invite a wetland expert to speak at schools and clubs, and avoid wetlands for construction.
Thank you so much for answering our questions. We'll see you all on Wednesday from the Chesapeake Bay.